All right, everyone, welcome. Welcome to Thrive in Uncertain Times. I'm your host, Ayori Selassie. I am the founder and creator of Life Model Canvas, a tool to help you design your life and achieve what I like to call work-life integrity. You're joining us for this special series that we pulled together to engage our community and support our community and create a safe space for folks as we are going through this COVID-19 crisis, as you are aware. Today, we are going to be talking about a very powerful topic. We're going to be talking about how do we move forward after this crisis? And we're going to be talking about how to leap from survive to thrive. I have some really wonderful, special friends of mine here that are going to help lead us through this discussion. And before we introduce them, I'd like to introduce my co-host. I have two co-hosts today. I've got my 8-month-old son who's right here playing at my feet, and the amazing Rasha Stewart. Welcome, Rasha.
Hello, everybody. You got four co-hosts. I have my co-host here playing with her diaper. My name is Rasha Stewart. I'm an inspiring entrepreneur and a co-host now. So this is a great experience, and I'm happy to be here today.
Wonderful. We're happy to have you. Thank you. This is not possible without your wonderful energy. And actually, before we introduce our guest, I'd like to just have us all join in for a brief moment of silence. We really want to recognize the struggle that so many are going through right now. Many people are struggling for their lives right now. Many people have lost loved ones. Um, uh, Many people have lost jobs and are struggling financially. Um, and this is a challenging experience for us all. And so we want to just take a moment of silence, get in touch with our heart, get in touch with our intention as we move through this hour. I choose to pray during my moment of silence, and you can use it however you like to. And welcome back. And with that, I am so pleased to introduce two good friends of mine, April McMurtry and Sita Davis. They are both creators and co-creators of an incredible tool called The Moon is My Calendar, local to the Bay Area, and just wonderful, wonderful people. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Ayori. Thank you so much for having us and hosting us and just holding this space to connect and explore this unknown that we're finding ourselves in.
Thank you. Beautiful to be here and to see your face again and meet Amador in person.
Yeah, we miss you. We miss you. But we can gather here safely in the virtual world. Is that crazy? I never imagined that. So could y'all just share a little bit more about your backgrounds and actually before that, how are you doing? How are you doing?
You know, the conversation about surviving and thriving, I feel like there's this going back and forth in between those modes of not knowing, like, okay, I'm okay right now. What is tomorrow going to bring? And then times where it feels like, wow, I have space to breathe. I'm not getting in my car, which had been my intention for a long time, is to get out of like using fuel in that way. And so there is this aliveness that's coming forward in a time with so much devastation and loss. So that surviving and thriving feels like this kind of teeter-totter of, even within one day, having moments of feeling in both of those spaces.
Understand. What about you, Sita?
One thing we talk about in the Moon is My Calendar often is our orbits. And so what are our everyday orbits of emotion that we travel frequently through? And I feel like I'm orbiting more often than usual, going from one extreme to the other. And yeah, I've experienced bliss and terror and stress and a real beautiful abiding love that comes after committing to being in the present moment, knowing that that my sort of rational grasping of what is safe and what is gonna hold me is kind of has been crumbling, right? So I have to redirect towards something that is maybe beyond that. It's in the infinite. I feel like I've had moments of real expansion, real beautiful expansion, and then on the very simple level, connecting with nature, like just making sure that I have enough plants around me and that I speak to them every day. And I feel like just being at home more has allowed for those relationships to really strengthen between me and my plants, and the insects that fly in and whatever, like realizing that I'm in constant relationship with everything, with the water that I'm drinking, with the air that I'm breathing.
That's a really interesting way to put it, because it's kind of like, a lot of us have been struggling with like this feeling of isolation from being like locked up in our houses and being unable to visit or spend time with the people that we love and we cherish. And it's interesting how you've kind of turned all the elements in your space into like friends in a way. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like the water, like, I mean, really, like that water is a thriving force. I mean, wow, how powerful is that, right?
So powerful. And I think what got us to this place in the first place is not acknowledging that, is not knowing that we're in relationship with everything that we're surrounded with the soil, with the plants, with the green plants that are producing oxygen. Like, how many breaths have I taken without honoring and thanking the plants that are giving me that oxygen for being there, for making it possible, right? And so if that disconnect from all of the nourishment that surrounds us all the time, that allows for our life to be possible, that disconnect between me and my awareness of all of those gifts, is what got us here in the first place, right? Being a species that has started to destroy life as opposed to contribute to it and uplift it and be a part of this reciprocal cycle. Anyway, I get really excited about this. I'm talking.
I heard that. Rasha, what about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's Friday. That's a start. I mean, it might not mean anything anymore. It's Friday, since every day is basically the weekend. But I feel like this is a time to, like Sita said, pay attention to the things that's going on out the side of our like human selves. It does bring me to like a thought though, like how are we supposed to be? Because if we really are going to give acknowledgement to the plants, give acknowledgement, for instance, to the trees and the wood and things like that, how should we have been before this pandemic? Like, I don't know if that's make any sense, but I'm thinking about like, should we be up in the woods, feeding the squirrels? We shouldn't really have streets paved or anything like that. Like, there's animals coming out right now, but as soon as we go back into the world, are we going to change the way we're going back into the world? I'm thinking about a whole bunch of different things based off of what you all said. What about you, Ayori?
You know, you know, since we had that moment to kind of connect, you know, before we went live, you know, I get my energy from positive people, right? Like, I mean, I have my own store of energy. Obviously, I get energy from the creator of all things, right? God. But I also really like, I'm really energized by good people. And, you know, it has been a struggle for me to like not be able to go in and have like that shared space with my good people. So that's been a struggle. But today, you know, getting through the work week, um, all you know, all of the stressors that honestly like really shouldn't even be stressors because they're trivial in the grand sense of things. But having gotten through all of that and being able to like welcome in this weekend and you know, take a breath and just kind of like, you know, my teenagers say like, let's do something fun this weekend, was like a huge sigh of relief for me, like huge, you know, just like, you know, I was able to just finally catch my breath. So I'm feeling much better right now. And you know, and it's not without receiving a lot worse news. Like I've gotten a lot worse news, information about what's going on with this crisis. Um, However, I am like I'm holding fast to hope. You know, I'm holding fast to hope, and I'm holding fast to the present moment because this is where we are today. And so fear is about the future. Um, uh, and if you can stay in the present, then you can take action from this moment, and you can be powerful from this moment. But you can't be powerful from the future because it hasn't happened yet. And you also can't be weak from the future because it hasn't happened yet. So I'm strong right now today. That's how I feel.
Mm.
That's a good way to start off the weekend, quote unquote weekend.
I think that that part of keeping track of time when there isn't that structure of here's a work week or, you know, getting kids to school or wherever, those kinds of things that have been interrupted. I do feel like the work with the moon and creating a lunar calendar and getting on this other parallel natural time that's off the grid has been preparing for this to have a sense of time that is about cycles and that is about connecting with nature and a rhythm that goes through phases. And that has been something that has been very anchoring in a time that is very disorienting. Like we just kind of threw bedtime out the window at one point. We're just like, well, no one has to get up in the morning. I mean, we got to 10 a.m. is the Zoom for distance learning. So if we could make it by that, but otherwise, so that kind of disruption, we've got back into a rhythm with the day and night cycles. But this is something that both Sita and I have really begun to share more, is these cycles within cycles. And we can tune into what you were both talking about, the breath, that cycle of expansion and contraction, the night of opening up the day and expanding, and then coming to a close with the day and night. And then over a lunar cycle that goes from, you know, we're building up to a full moon. So this building that expands, and then this releasing and letting go that happens even over our own lifetime.
Yeah, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that full moon come on. Actually, like I keep my windows my windows open at night. You know, and there's just trees and all that kind of stuff, and so I can see as like the moon is getting brighter and brighter. And I remember looking up last night and just thinking like, wow, you know, like we're nearing the end of another cycle, right? And so with that, I want to come back to this topic of seasons and this topic of these cycles and where they all live, like around us and within us. But before we come back to that, I want you all to talk a little bit about the calendar because you know, I've been using the calendar, that you both created. It's wonderful. It's been very helpful for me. It's been transformative in many ways for me. You know, like my life model canvas is very cerebral. It's very tactical and strategic and word oriented, and it's about relationships and relating ideas. But what I found in using the moon as my calendar is that it allowed me to bring things out from within me that I didn't know were within me, because it allowed me to get in touch with these different cycles. So talk a little bit about the moon as my calendar. Give us an introduction.
I just want to comment on how part of this conversation, the real theme, and that what came to me by working with this tool, creating this tool, living by cycles, is that in moving forward, life on this planet, the structures must be cyclical. Whatever structures are in place, because we have a structure that is only the projected growth on an upward that doesn't take account like the dips. So it's this boom and then bust, bubble, and linear, and doesn't give that time for the pause. And now we have this extended pause that's like, feeling endless. And yet within the structure of cycles. And so that's part of the calendar. I actually there's a wall calendar right behind me that it's bigger. So maybe I can pull that down just to see and show you. But it's a tool that came out of many years, like more than 10 years probably. Sita and I met on the new moon after becoming new moms. Really was like we'd see each other at the playground and get maybe like half or not even half a conversation in. And then, it would always be like interrupted, that's like you're always on the move, like right there with little ones. So we began meeting on the new moon. And I think Sita, at first you would call me and be like, all right, new moon is on Wednesday, or it's on like whatever day of the week, and we just honor the new moon, and then we'd meet and we'd be able to connect and then really reflect on the transformations that were happening, the big changes in our lives. And then at a certain point, I was like, I think we need a tool, because I'd have 4 just different journals happening at the same time. I'd lose track of my intentions from the cycle before, and I didn't have like a place for it all to live in one place. And so from there, it kind of struck like lightning on a Thanksgiving day. Maybe this was 6 years ago now, I think. It was like, this is the year, it has to happen. It's 2014. It's like, it just has to happen. So I told my husband, I was like, this has to happen. Can you help me? Here's the idea. It's got to be a circle, and it's got to be divided in this way. And he's like self-taught in design and all the Adobe stuff. So we sort of worked that out, worked like round the clock, and got it ready for that winter solstice in 2014. So that was the first calendar. And Sita's she's holding it up. And then this is the wall calendar, which this is the second year, that has mandalas from beautiful lunar folks and women in the community. And it starts at the new moon. So that being the dark of the moon time of.
And so I want to describe it a little bit. Just hold it up there. I want to describe it a little bit, what folks are seeing. I should have put it on a slide. I mean, with all this technology I have, but I didn't. But what you're seeing there on the screen with this calendar is that the moon actually moves in different cycles, right? It goes from basically not being able to see the moon, where it's a new moon, all the way to when it's full. And so there's all these phases in between that. And to chart, like in every day, what the moon is going to look like on any given day. So you all, for every new year that's coming, you all create a calendar and you chart the phases of the moon on that calendar. And
every year is different. So it's not like, you make it once and then you can kind of do a repeat. It repeats every 18, 19 years. So at that point, maybe, I mean, who knows?
That's the first cycle of adolescence, right? That's the first season of life through that adolescence.
Yeah.
Mhm.
April, do you have the image of the concentric circles? We've
Yes.
been teaching a spring reset course that ended maybe a few weeks ago, and we're restarting another one pretty soon. So yeah, with the idea of really resetting, and nature has so many beautiful metaphors for us, and one of those is this opportunity for starting anew, starting fresh. So with each new moon, we start a new cycle, and we're able to let go of whatever needed to be let go of. And before, so each moon cycle in this calendar starts with a page for reflecting and releasing. So just like the life cycle of a flower or a breath, or these concentric circles, or the day and the night, there's this time for letting go, for death, right? There's fall, and all of the leaves fall off of the trees, and then the trees are left there naked, right? They're pre-formed. We don't know sometimes, even, like, what are the leaves going to look like? What are the blossoms going to look like? We don't know. And as a culture and society, Western syndrome of like consume, linear, square, rectangular, these sort of ways of being in the world don't honor that time, especially the new moon time, right? And that's why April chose to put the new moon at the top as opposed to at the bottom, like giving it priority. Like, yes, there is darkness. There's this time for silence, for inwardness, for honoring death, right? Whether it's through grief and tears, and or really just being in that part of us, of ourselves, that has died through transformation and through all of the cycles that we go through. And so, yeah, that's what this calendar is all about, is using those beautiful metaphors of nature to honor all of the phases, not just some of them, not just the full moon when we're all out there and radiant and shining in an external kind of way, but all of the phases. And Ayori, what you were referring to, it sounds like, is maybe menstruation, and people in a female body beginning this phase. I guess what you could think of as well, I guess if you're talking about the life cycle, so if we're talking about concentric circles, right, the breath would be at the very center. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it's really deep, because I don't know if I don't know if you remember, Sita. I don't know if you remember what you were doing on January 1st of 2019, but I do. Do you remember what you were doing?
Was that when we had that beautiful women's retreat?
Yeah. So what actually, no, it wasn't the women's retreat. It was, you did a hike. You hosted a hike, and you took us all like mushroom hunting, right? Well, not actually, we didn't go mushroom hunting. You just kind of talked a little bit about it, right? So Sita took us on this hike. She took us on this wonderful hike, and it was my whole family, right? And we did yoga before and all this stuff. And that was when I started using the moon as my calendar. And it literally, that was like an awakening of like a season of fertility for me. And that was the month that my son was conceived. And I just remember that, like, that energy of being in company, being amongst positivity, and setting, intentions for love, for creation, for building, for healing, right? And letting go of everything that happened in 2018. 2018 was a really tough year. It was like bitter and sweet, right? It had some hard stuff and had some good stuff, but I really had to let go of some of the negative stuff that happened that year. And so moving forward, and it just like blossomed literally into new life. And I was using that calendar along the way to help me to engage and reconnect with myself, and to take those moments of pause, and to connect with people around me. And I think as we're going through this particular crisis, it becomes very significant for me, because there is a lot of trauma that people are experiencing right now, of all ages, our kids, our teenagers, elderly folks, essential workers. Like, a lot of people are experiencing trauma, and there's going to have to be, for us to awaken to our greatness and for us to create a better world after this crisis passes, there's going to have to be a way for us to process that trauma and release it, for us to enter into our healing stages. So, because we have to create from a place of being healed, we can't create from a place of being hurt.
Yes.
I have to pick up my baby.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm interested, I want to hear a little bit more about you know the I'm going to go back to that topic of seasons, and how everything kind of has its season.
Should we go through, this was what Sita was mentioning, the concentric circles, the overlapping, to kind of see how this pulse that we can experience with our own breath, when we have to come back to the very, very basics, all the way out to the whole life cycle. And within that, then experiencing what those seasons are, sort of like what Sita was describing within the calendar itself, of each phase having a particular gift and a challenge to it as well. And yeah, all the way up, this overlapping, having the exhale, that emptiness, midnight, the least light, that turning point, right, is the turning point of turning towards the light, which is also the new moon, is that darkest, the moon's not visible, and there's that pause in that time of like, is the moon going to come back? Just like with the trees, like, is the tree dead, or is it going to come back again? And that's why really springtime is a time for so much of that revival, and any of what's celebrated around this time is that coming back to life. And so noticing that, and that is one way for that tuning into something outside of ourselves, is noticing what is coming back to life alongside all of the loss. And the moon brings that reminder cycle after cycle. So midnight, the new moon, and then menstruation, that when there is bleeding, it's also, there was no life that was created in that cycle. So it is a loss, and it is the body having its way to release that. And so of course there can be emotions of grieving and of sadness, and sometimes there isn't room or permission to even feel those feelings. And so if we don't have permission to feel those feelings with our own menstrual cycle, then when we're in a crisis like this, when maybe we've been told to like buck up, or you're so emotional, or like think of all the things that that we're told, then in a crisis like this is how, then what are my real feelings, and how can I express them, or even connect with them to feel them. And from menstruation, then the winter solstice. So in the northern in the northern hemisphere, on our winter solstice in December, the shortest day, so the least amount of light, and the sun is just setting, and so it feels like, how much more constricting can it be? Like, how much more like squeezing can that be, to feel like, is the light going to return? And then it does. And so many spiritual traditions have ways to acknowledge this and celebrate that. And yet, I find sometimes is that month of December is so busy. There's so much light. It's like so overdone that there hasn't even been the space in the Western culture to honor that, and to know that, and find that wisdom and that blessing from the dark. So
you make me think about something. There's I think in our Western culture, we are very desensitized. Like, we're desensitized to so much, right? I mean, and when you have that kind of being desensitized even to your own self. You're desensitized to everything else that's around you, right? And so that makes it really hard when something really, really bad happens. It catches you so far off guard, right? It catches you so far off guard, and then you don't know how to cope with it because you've been suppressing every feeling that was like real. And so in this like thing that we're experiencing right now, you know, it's I can speak for myself, right? I can suppress things. Like I'm really good with dealing with crises. Actually did like a crisis intervention, both like with people and their lives, but also with technology, which is also crazy. And so I am have been very desensitized and like very good at compartmentalizing things. Um, but in this experience, you know, I couldn't, right? I'm like a bleeding heart over here. Like I'm feeling everybody's pain. I'm like being extremely empathetic. And then in coping with that though, like I immediately went to plants, right? I immediately went to plants. I immediately went to the water. Thank God we're on the coast. You know, so I can go and in the, you know, in the mornings and watch the waves, just come in and go out, like watch the tide ebb and flow. Um, you know, plant your seeds, watch the seeds sprout into seedlings, you know, just slowly watching them grow. And then literally that causes like my body and my consciousness, my sense of self to slow down enough to actually get in touch with what I'm actually feeling. And you know, when that happened, um, what I actually felt was like I needed to do something, but I needed to do something that wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It was like I need to slow down and I need to connect. And that's actually why I started doing this series. It was really out of that. It was really out of that awakening uh that came from like planting seeds in my little container garden on my balcony.
This is a interesting conversation. At this time, I want to know, does the moon, the chart that you guys created, does it have anything to do with astrology at all? So I'm understanding this is like the season of Taurus, right? And when I think about Taurus, I think about like a bull. I think about somebody that's gonna get something done no matter what. Very like, I don't want to say not subtle, but they're gonna get done what they need to get done. So since we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about kind of going head first into this time. Like, let me think on my feet. Let me take my emotions out of it. Is that something that everyone may be going through, or is it just me feeling this way? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a good question, because the origins of the calendar really were in the phases and really, really based around the new moon as this anchor for a reset. Because I felt like if we get that on New Year's, like supposedly there's a new year and you have to wait 365 days to get there, it's a long time. And so to have something where every 29 and a half days there's can be a reset to really look at your values and your priorities and what have been my habits and what gets repeated. That's what we become over time. And now we're in this time of like those things that have been repeated as daily habits or just through whatever our daily life has been. For many people, that is very different at this moment. So the calendar itself, then you can start to bring in these rhythms through the phases. And then this is the first year. So along the way, then I got more interested in the astrology and took it with a grain of salt, because I was like, is that true? Is that just like,
Perception?
or just, I think because the way my sun sign was described, I never related to. And so I don't like the kind of personality type things that box people in. and it felt, something about it felt limiting. And then I started to, because like Taurus, like you said, there can be this stereotype of being stubborn. And that's,
I don't want to say that.
yeah, so like, oh, that doesn't feel good to be called stubborn. So then to really look into how is astrology aligned with the seasons, at least Western astrology, because there's many different systems of making sense of, wow, this time of year feels different than that time of year. And so this is the first year that in the calendar itself, there are the symbols. So you can see this April-May cycle, the new moon is was in Taurus. And so for the whole month, the sun moves through that sign of Taurus, and that it's just on the new moon that the new moon is also in Taurus, and then the moon continues to move through all the signs every about 2.5 days.
Okay.
The moon is on the move. Like if there was anything that could teach us about constantly changing and not holding on to one particular form, the moon offers that gift and that teaching. And it does, I'm actually starting on Monday, I'm going to teach a week-long knowing your moon. So a lot of people maybe know or have heard of their sun sign, which is also very Western, very solar, very like active, visible, taking action.
Is there a difference between the Western and Vedic astrology?
Yeah. And then it's like, oh my goodness, that then is like, well, what's real? What's true?
Yeah. So it goes into a whole different conversation, I guess.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I went down that road, which turned into these spirals, and it's like, wow, I guess you have to choose a system and see what benefit there is from the wisdom and from learning and comparing, or yeah, but it was all came from observation. It came from observation of nature, and that's why when it is, seasonal, and Taurus being about the garden, and about growth and about earth and the resources and how they're valued, then that makes a lot of sense for this time.
Yeah, I think this time is so much a reset for all of humanity to look at how the road that we've been on, like I said, of consumption, of using, and kind of a linear, right? A line has this way of like starting and then having a middle point and then having an end point, and then it's like, what happens after that on the line? There's nothing after that, right? Whereas a cycle, a circle, or a spiral, that's how nature really is. It just is, like a flower dies and it drops its petals, and the petals become compost and nutrients for the future flower, and then the seed pops off of what's left, and then the rain falls and the sun comes, and there you have another flower, in whatever time period that takes. And so taking refuge and solace in that cyclicality of life and of our own nature. And just thinking about, Ayori, your question about the trauma of right now, and how, like, if we think of the input of a stressor, and how that comes in, if we do this linearly, right, then the input comes in and it just goes and goes and goes and goes, and like you said, there's no outlet, there's no release, there's no restarting. The cycle has to be completed. So if there's an input that's a stress to me, like, okay, I just went to the grocery store and I noticed myself tensing up horribly when I interacted with the person next to me, or I had to walk down that narrow aisle, or whatever it was, or I just lost a loved one, or whatever, from the smallest to the largest stressor, if we can be aware, like, oh, that affected my body, that affected my being, and now I need to complete the circle, and I need to express that somehow. Like, I just got another email from Kaiser talking about the importance of journaling. Ding, ding. And so this is a way of expressing, like I express through symbols, what my physical experiences were, what my emotional experiences were, What were the stimulus? And so there's journaling, there's breathing, there's yoga and movement, like even if it's just shaking, like or making a ridiculous sound, or humming or screaming, or like Amador before we started made that wonderful what a beautiful lesson. Like that's how we get through trauma. We let ourselves express what comes in as a stimulus, and we remind ourselves through the beauty of observation of nature, that everything is a phase, and that we have all these beautiful opportunities to restart. And even if we don't have any plants around, like I have a friend, I remember she went on a meditation retreat and she got lost for hours in staring at her own hand. There's so many ways that we can connect with nature. Like I could like look in the mirror and look at my my iris, of my eye, and see the solar system, or see the expansiveness of. So just returning to all of those, really available, as long as we move through the rah, the expression. There's a pose in yoga called lion's pose, right? And we like cross our eyes and we stick out our tongue and we breathe with this really expressive roar. We need so much more of that.
Amador is literally doing that right now.
My favorite pose when she took a kids yoga class from a teacher. She's like, you mean I can make noise and I can like feel, for her, like anger, and have this expression. And she loved it because there wasn't another place for her to do that. And that I've been thinking about how before the shelter in place, or as my kids call it, the lockdown, the confinement of just staying put, I had wanted to go to a thrift store and buy a bunch of dishes, to be able to have somewhere to go and just break and just throw dishes. And part of that comes from like, what are the outlets for built up anger or stress that don't then hurt somebody else, that don't come out at somebody else? And I think from being often in a very creative mode, creative and nurturing and taking care of and holding together, that is half of the cycle. That's half of everything. There is a part where there is a coming apart and a destruction and a breaking apart, or a coming apart at the seams. That isn't, where are the practices for that? So that now that we're in this worldwide time of that coming apart of the seams, without having a practice of going through that, and like Sita was describing, of having that reflecting and releasing and seeing what part of me is dying or that I'm letting go of to start fresh and start new, what part of our systems and structures and society really, there was a point, maybe this was, so on the Moon is my calendar, I have an Instagram, and I'm usually very active and post a lot. And right now I'm just taking more of a pause from that. But anytime that I've posted about death, I've gotten so many likes on that. And I'm like, that's really, there's a beautiful quote. I'll find it. There's a quote from Rumi that I'll share that had the most out of anything I've posted about anything else. And so that having and connecting with what came to me as like, we all need to be death doulas for the patriarchy, for the system that is so oppressive and creates structures that are not like, when I was reading the New York Times article about how many essential workers themselves do not have healthcare, it is so criminal. And it's been the system that's been in place, that's been just there, and that has to change. So this idea of being a death doula, right? There's the doulas that bring life into the world, and those that help with that other transition and passage. I'll find the Rumi quote and I'll.
Yeah, actually, you make me think of two different things. One, you guys just went through a collection of practices that allow your body to release pent up energy, right? And my mom taught us when we were young to do the yoga, and we would do the lion, the one that you described, where you you open your eyes up, you stick your tongue out, and yeah, I just did that on camera, y'all. Right? And she would teach us to do that one, and that particular yoga move, right, is healing. Actually, it's healing for the lungs, right? And what's happening right now with people being ill and having these respiratory issues, right? It's living in the lungs, and we have to be able to release that. And another thing that lives in the lungs, on the topic of traditional Chinese medicine, is sadness, right? And so when you go through something where you experience loss or pain or sadness or feeling out of control, it can also weaken your lungs, because it forces you to catch your breath, right? And the reason why that movie was called Waiting to Exhale is because we don't actually breathe through breathing in. We breathe through the strength of our exhale. So if you really want to process something, you want to breathe out. And you just push it out, push the air out, because that's going to cause you to breathe in more deeply and fill your lungs up again with life. And the filling of the lungs with air and life allows you to, again, move out anything else with the exhale again. So it's a cycle. And that traditional Chinese medicine also uses the circle, right? And that was one of the things that we really I was like, Sita, April, like, we gotta do something. And because the circle, when there's the circle of life, everything is a cycle in our life, right? But there's something about that shape. And another thing that it makes me think about in traditional Chinese medicine is that every organ in our body actually has a cycle. And just like the moon moves through different phases throughout the month, all of our organs have different phases of cleansing throughout the day and throughout the night. And our body is on a nocturnal plus daylight cycle. It's called, like, you can actually look it up. It's called chronobiology. And it talks about the cycles of the human body and all the organs within inside. And so by helping people to tap into these different practices, and these are ancient practices, right? By helping people tap into these practices, it can help you to process trauma, move through really difficult emotions and states. And this is a real important piece. This is a big piece here. It can help you to awaken and become aware of your vision within. It's like opening a door to the future that lives within you.
That's a good way to look at it. I feel like all the cleansing that we're doing inside of our own bodies, that's what the earth is doing right now. And like where it's germs, where the earth's germs, and we're going in panic, like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? Some of us are dying off, and we just have to remember that the earth has to reset too. It's a living organism as well. So of course we're gonna feel some pain and feel some sadness, but that's number one, a thing that makes it stronger. And then number two, it's a reminder of, we gotta take care of our health as well. And I think it is important. I know they're saying we need to stay in the house, like it's our own little jail cell with the internet. But I think it's important to get some fresh air. My husband was explaining to me the other day that, our bodies are adapting to germs. So if we're stuck in the house and we just got Lysol on every wall, on every counter, we're not exposing ourselves to anything new. So then when it is time to go out, we could get sick, and we might see more deaths happen when we do go out. And then people are probably going to blame it on people going out like me. I'm not going to lie, I've been out. But anyway, they're going to blame it on those people, saying, it's you guys' fault. You guys were going out spreading germs. It's like, no, your bodies weren't adapting to anything new.
Yeah. Now I agree with that 100%, because we go out too, and, even if it's just like a walk around the neighborhood, because you're right, our bodies actually need to be exposed to the environment. Um, you know, we're not bears. We're not designed for hibernation. So it is real. Like we have to find ways to make sure that we're still, using our body in the way that it's designed to be used. I have another question though. I want to transition the conversation a little bit um to like how do we begin to recognize thriving when it's happening? Because, I have a belief that, some of the people on this call who are listening in or who might replay this, um, they're gonna go through a point where they're really surviving, they're really struggling with this survival thing. And then they're gonna overcome it. And but they're gonna still feel like they're in it. And so, how do they recognize when they've actually moved past the survival period and you're actually in a state of thriving? And we can be in that state. I can be thriving in my personal life, but I can be struggling in my career. I can be, you know, struggling with my family, but I can be thriving with my career and, every other kind of combination. So, how do you start to recognize and see these signs of thriving in your own life?
Mm, that's such a beautiful and powerful question, because at any point, pandemic or not, it's so critical. And I think what I've noticed recently is that the it's almost like the bridge, the gratitude being this bridge. Anytime that I felt like or questioned how am I going to get through this, taking a step up with gratitude each time, um, and completely feeling that in a way. And this situation has brought that to me even at the grocery store. Just the other day I found myself, every cucumber was like, thank you. And I just almost started crying by just like, there's cucumbers that I can bring home to my family, because there's points where it's like, where's the food supply? Like really those basic survival, like questions, to then just be in this gratitude of here's this cucumber and thanking it with maybe I'll say it out loud next time, so that we can be in this community of thriving, where that, like what Sita was saying, where that acknowledgement, and where what all of us are saying is that acknowledgement of the gifts that are here, and acknowledgement even of those challenges as gifts, where there's sometimes that a turning point where they're able to be understood as a gift, when in the moment it's just being able to get through. But
Yeah, that's powerful. So gratitude itself is a sign of thriving. Um, Anything else you would add, Sita or Rasha, on that one?
Yeah, I think trauma has a way of keeping us stuck in the past, right? We replay whatever the experience was, and our nervous system is activated in the same ways as it was during whatever the traumatic event. And then there's, continual, what's it called? Compact trauma, or I'm forgetting the exact word right now, but where the trauma continues. What was that?
Compound trauma.
Yeah, where the trauma is continuing day to day, right? And so returning to the present moment again, like does thriving mean that we're always happy and everything goes perfect in our life? Like absolutely not. I think we really need to redefine trauma from trauma. We need to redefine thriving from perfectionism, or like some magazine cover idealized view of what somebody's life might look like, or what I would like my life to look like, to, yeah, am I able to be grateful for this moment, for this breath, for this life, for all the gifts that I've been given. Yeah, that feels like thriving to me. So even like the other night when I was so mad, I was so angry, I was like just brr. And it was probably a combination of many of the different concentric circles, like, all together, right? Like a pre-menstruation, whatever, not enough sleep, not honoring nighttime. And then just a frustration with my child. And I was so angry. And then I got on Facebook and started reading about all the stuff that's going on. And like, I think it was really came to a head when I read that the military is gonna honor essential workers by doing like a flyover with military planes. I'm like, masks and gloves and fair pay, that's what people need. Like, so I just was getting so angry on so many different levels, and wanting to fight about it, like wanting to stop and set that boundary, right? Anger has such an important place for boundary setting, for creating like, no, this is what I will no longer accept. So anyway, but instead of expressing that anger, I was like, oh, I was just festering in it, right? So then I grabbed my journal because I was like, okay, I'm at least going to start writing about it. I grabbed my journal and I whacked my my favorite handmade ceramic mug off of the shelf, and it splattered on the floor and shattered into 100 pieces.
Oh.
And I just burst into tears, right? Because there was so much else that went into those tears, besides, of course, losing my favorite mug that I bought myself on my birthday, like. But I thought afterwards, after I just let myself collapse into those tears, like, this is thriving. This is thriving because I let it happen, like to let something break and end and to say goodbye to it.
Absolutely.
And to let ourselves feel fully what needs to be felt, like, that's thriving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I think thriving for me is I don't know. I noticed you two have been saying being present, and I think this is the most present I've been during this time, being able to create something that I'm not necessarily making any money off of, but it is forcing me to do something outside my comfort zone, getting to know different people with different perspectives. I think that's a form of thriving, just learning. And going back to what you two were saying, I know earlier you said you got your aggression out by doing poses like a lion, which is cool. And then you broke your favorite mug. That's cool. It shows a lot of maturity because there's people out there. It's a lot of maturity. There's a lot of people out there. Well, not a lot, but there's people out there that's taking their aggression out in dangerous ways. So, if it's just going to cost you a mug, pat yourself on the back. You're thriving because you're not over here shooting up a school or doing something really tragic. So that's great.
Right on.
Here, there.
We're almost to the end here. I don't know how the time just flew, man. That was fast.
People are howling in my neighborhood. Sorry to interrupt you, Ayori, but it's the 8 o'clock howl. I don't know if it happens in
are you in Marin?
No, I mean, I think it started in Colorado, and it's just my neighborhood has taken to it also.
Oh. They don't howl where I'm at.
I'm not here either.
But I wanna go ahead and start wrapping up. This has been so amazing, but I have a couple of quick questions about the future for everyone. I want to hear, what's your action plan for the future? What's your action plan during this time first? Like, how are you gonna continue to kind of get through this? Because you got to survive this. You got to get through this, survive, so you can thrive. So what's your action plan during this time?
Oof. I think being present to the unknown, and also having that vision of what is the best case scenario, like really what would be the best case scenario, and putting in place, really, like I said, the structures must be cyclical. So how can I really put in place, when I have this grace period of time, to not be always on the go, to really create a life that is more cyclical, and honors the seasons. So I think even, with printing the calendar, we've already passed all the deadlines that were set about like having things ready for the printing in the fall, and are the printers going to be up and running? And so these kind of being present with the unknown, and also creating that vision of this work and helping more people to connect with both with nature and seeing themselves as a part of nature, within the cycles, that work is for this time and for moving forward, and continuing to honor what's essential and really being able to name that and be grateful for all of the gifts, but everything that really feels like the most essential parts of life, when everything else is kind of stripped away. So I'll read the quote that I found, the Rumi poem. It says, "Goodbyes are only for those who love with their eyes, because for those who love with heart and soul, there is no such thing as a separation. Death has nothing to do with going away. The sun sets, the moon sets, but they are not gone."
That's deep. That's a plan. Heard that. What about you, Sita? What's your action plan during this time?
So yeah, I definitely am more right-brained than action plan. So yeah, right now it feels like the most important thing is to be present with the unfolding of what is being asked of us. And what I mean by that, I guess, is I felt a calling, even as a child, I felt a calling to return to nature in some way, my own true nature, to be a part of the systems that brought the food onto my plate, to know where my food came from, to know where my breath came from, where the oxygen that I'm breathing in came from, and to be a part of that cycle of reciprocity. There was sort of this knowing inside of me that humanity was out of alignment, and that we were not we were not a part of a cycle of reciprocity, but this just very destructive way of being in the world. And so I felt that calling so deeply inside of me for so many years, and it's been painful. And as usually menstruation or the premenstrual phase of my menstrual cycle is sort of the opportunity that I have every cycle to see, the tide goes out really, really low, and you get to see all of the stuff that was maybe on the bottom of the sea, and you get to be like, all right, this needs to be looked at. And so every cycle, for maybe 10-15 years, I've felt I'm not living in alignment in the ways that I want to be, and it's been deeply heart-wrenchingly painful, like using all of this electricity and drinking and using water in a way that's not sustainable, and the food that comes to me is not sustainable. And so my action plan for right now is to find that way of living in alignment that I've been trying slowly, little itty bitty baby step by baby step and moving towards for so many years. But to really visualize that in a deep way, and to take more concrete steps, like growing my own food. And for if there's anybody out there who resonates with, and you want to grow your own food, but you're like, oh, I live in an apartment, in the middle of the city. Of course, there's so many ways, of course, to do that. But I think we do, like Rasha, you were saying at the beginning, we do need to think about the bigger structures, and can we continue to live in cities in the way that we have lived in cities? Like, I don't think so. No, I think we need to have rooftop gardens, and I think we need to know our neighbors, and I think we need to be seeing ourselves as this interconnected network that we are. And that for me, using this moon calendar, has living somewhat disconnected from nature has been this constant way of anchoring back into the wisdom Mother
Awesome.
Nature. So yeah, I thank April infinitely for creating this calendar, and within the beautiful sisterhood that we have created, and I'm just so grateful also, Ayori, for
Yeah.
this opportunity.
And we do have some folks that are joining us, so I want to make sure that we allow for some time for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them on in there, and we will get to your question for sure before we end this. But the other question I'd have for you all is, what is one survival skill that you're proud of that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Lion's pose. um, Roaring. I think really the survival skill is that it's like I set this intention in the calendar. I think this was the February-March cycle. So there's this page for seeds of intention, and every stimuli, every feeling, every experience must move through me. The cycle must be completed. Breathe. Come to present moment awareness through each phase. So I drew this little symbol, and every time I achieved that, I drew it. I drew the symbol in my moon calendar, right? And so having the intelligence and the intimacy with myself to notice that something has affected my energy and I don't feel good. That's number one. Notice, and then choose, how am I going to express that? How am I going to let that move through me? And then celebrating when I've made it to the other end. And that notice, choose, act, celebrate, those 4 steps come from an organization called Challenge Day, who I recommend looking them up. Just wonderful, beautiful, beautiful work in the world. And so, yeah, that would be it. Celebrating, like, oh, wow, look, now I have this freedom and expansiveness in my body because I let myself express the
Awesome.
reaction to that stimulus.
Awesome. Yeah, that's deep. What about you, April?
Good question. My first thing was like, I've come to a place in my life where I can get myself out of bed even if I don't feel like it. And that may not seem like a survival skill, but I feel like somewhere along the line, one of the weeks, I was like, I'm just not going to get out of bed anymore. Like I almost had that feeling of the hopelessness of all of it. But I've had a lot of practice, and it actually has been with the calendar. I think because of really early motherhood, of like never getting out of my pajamas and always being like wet with milk and all the other things that just felt like, why try? Why even try? To come to a place where there's meaning, where I have meaning in my life that gets me out of bed in the morning. And so connecting with that meaning, and part of that is my quiet time in the morning of just breathing and meditating and being in a receptive state. And so that's my first thing of having really connecting with like, what am I have to look forward today? And so finding that and having that meaning to get out of bed. And yeah, I think at this point too, of being in a place of feeling like, what's holding space for me? Because as a mother, I'm holding space for my daughters, for all their emotions, for everything they're feeling in this time. And it really is the cycle. The moon cycle is that container that continues to hold me cycle after cycle after cycle, and it just continues to deepen. And so feeling held, and then being able to provide that, especially for my daughters. But I'm going to keep thinking about that, because it's a great question. I'm like, survival skills. The first thing I did was I planted carrot seeds, and then I was like, saw that video on Facebook where you can just cut off the top of the carrot and put that right in the water, and then it starts to grow itself. I was like, all right, then that's what, just go straight to the root tops, and growing those, because really that all of what Sita was saying, so meaningful, of being in alignment to really connect with where does the nourishment come from, and to keep taking steps closer and closer of where does that nourish come from, and how can I provide that nourishment in whatever ways, in exchange, with others.
Yeah, right on. I did spring onions. That was the one that I did. And I saw it on a YouTube video too. And I was like, okay, my spring onions are thriving out there, y'all. They're doing well. Okay. I have two more questions if you have time. What is one practice that you could share that could help listeners thrive through this time? We talked about survival. What about thriving?
Singing really, I think this connects with the last question you asked as well. I love the nonviolent communication framework for recognizing our needs. So, you know, if I well, just knowing like I have a diverse array of needs, right? And sometimes it's like I need to feel held. I need um, that human contact. Being able to meet those needs in creative ways, like in nonviolent communication language, to have multiple strategies to meet my needs, right? I feel like this is a time of getting really creative with the strategies for meeting our needs, right? So maybe like, I don't know, I think I spent probably a whole month without a hug from anybody but my child. And those were very sporadic. And so that's new for me. I'm a big hugger, you know, that's really new for me. And so anyway, I went to the practice of Abhyanga, of self-massage with oil. And so, yeah, how many different ways can we meet that need of contact? And can I meet it for myself? Can I give myself a really meaningful, well thought, mindful, intentioned hug and be fully present with myself, right? Yeah, that would be my answer.
We actually talked about that one. I think we talked about that one in the very first call, right? Self massage and hugging. Because yeah, I did this thing where I said, you know, everybody gives each other 3 hugs a day, and if we do that, we'll be able to give each other enough support. But what about you, April? What's one practice you could share that could help our listeners thrive today?
There's really, one of my awarenesses on this time is really sensing the presence of other people when I am in public, which really is limited to grocery shopping and then like walks just through the neighborhood, is taking that time to really sense and feel and notice the presence of others. Something about distancing, that there is this distance that's created, like standing in line at the grocery store and 6 feet apart. What I'm hoping is that could create a practice of actually noticing a person's presence and their space. And so with what can come as negative from distance and isolation, to having appreciation of someone's presence through their absence. And it's a lot to sustain over a long period of time, but really almost that, you know, I can't wait to give Sita a hug. I'm like deprived. I feel so deprived. I feel so deprived. And so that feels like one thing is really tuning in, connecting with the presence of others through their absence. It makes things happen more on an energetic level of just of feeling someone. So maybe there is a kind of an empathy or a sixth sense or a kind of an awareness now that we're all connecting through screens, which was happening before, but now it's kind of primary. And yeah, that being able to smile with your eyes. You know, when I'm in public, it's like, this is covered. So how is it that connection can be made with the eyes of like, this is hard and I see you and I can't, like, you know, yeah. So there's so much more, but it's so great to just even have this conversation and be here and be in your presence. Like it feels like, I mean, it has that feeling of being in all of your presence.
Mm.
And so taking that as really drinking that in as nourishment.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know, that one really got me right there. I didn't even realize that I needed that smiling from the eyes, because with everyone walking around with the face masks on, it can be jarring. It can be jarring, and I'm going to practice that. I'm going to practice that because smiles are healing, right? It's infectious. It spreads. And if you can, and right now we need to be able to do it through our eyes, because that's the only thing we can see, and those are also, the window to the soul. That's deep.
Like when I go to the grocery store, I always smile to someone, but not even just that, I'll speak to them and then they'll act like they haven't spoken to somebody in days. So try speaking to somebody through your mask and see that reaction come out. It's usually positive. Well, it's never been negative. So it's a positive reaction. It could be someone that's the complete opposite of you. Like, just go for it. We're not getting fined yet to speak to each other, but I guess as long as you have a mask and you keep your distance, why not say hi, or why not say I like that shirt? Sometimes I'll look in someone's grocery basket, I'll be like, what are you making with that bok choy? And they'll just be so happy to speak to somebody. So, let's take it up a notch.
Right on. Absolutely. Shoot. You'll have to share that bok choy recipe with us later. Okay, and the last question is, what's your hope for the future when this is over?
I feel like there isn't like an over point in that way of that the future isn't fixed and there's a lot of creativity that needs to come through to create what's next. And that's going to be a process over time. And so I feel like part of it is starting to go through that grieving and that mourning of how we've lived life here on earth in a certain way. That I've been feeling for years living in the Bay Area of like, this can't go on like this. We can't bore another hole in the mountain to make another tunnel and then think traffic's going to go away, because then it just gets more. And the capacity of like grow to this point of like that feeling of it can't go on like this. And so the hope for the future is that there is more of an alignment and an understanding of the precious gifts that are here on this earth, the companionship and the connection and the presence of all creatures, all beings, you know. I think, Rasha, like you said, the animals are coming out, they're reclaiming spaces. And so acknowledging that presence and making spaces. I think there's something, Sita, you posted at one point of like bridges being created for wildlife so that they have a path to cross the dangerous highways. You know, this is their space. And so that acknowledgement and listening to the indigenous wisdom of the lands and the places where we're living, that I feel like that's my hope and my vision for the future, is that leadership is, and the voices of indigenous leaders are really, really the ones that we're listening to, and that policies are being guided by, and that we're guided back into the reciprocal relationship with the earth. So it's all of the hows. I mean, that comes through the creativity of how that becomes the new reality.
That's full. That is full, as felt. What about you, Sita?
Yeah, beautiful. I had the feeling the other day that I don't know, maybe for the last 500 years, at least Western society has been like a parasite to the earth, and that now is time for us to start being her immune system. And this virus feels like a real reminder of that, of how can we be earth protectors and protectors of each other, and see every living being as a part of our family. And yeah, everything that April said, exactly. I think, April, you shared a quote with me from Lila June that I'll share, that she's a powerful Indigenous performer and running for the House of Representatives in New Mexico. She says, a linear society that thinks in terms of cradle to grave will have an end point. It won't be sustained. However, a culture that thinks cyclically and reinvests all waste into its livelihood will continue like a circle. It will never end. So for us to come into right relationship to life itself, for me to be able to do that in my own actions and in my own life, that's my hope for me and for all of us, to see ourselves as family and care for ourselves and each other.
Mm, right on, right on. And what about you, Russia?
What about you?
You know what? I'm going to use a quote as well. In the wise words of one of the members and founders of the great Wu-Tang Clan, RZA. Okay, I just saw a flock of butterflies pass by my window. The animals is like bong bong. RZA. That's the quote, y'all.
Wait, what does bong bong mean?
It's up to interpretation.
What? I'm gonna interpret it like this. I know we all gotta get off this call, but I'm gonna interpret it like the animals is like, I see you.
Mm-hmm.
Starting to see the humans, we see you flocking.
I'm saying. So, this has been such a wonderful time to spend with you ladies. You mothers, you creators, you're all creators. We're all creators, and it's really been a joy. So, share how folks can get in contact with you all and get access to the incredible tools and resources that you shared.
Yeah, we have the website, all of the handles are The Moon Is My Calendar, is all one word. The Moon Is My Calendar. And I send out a PDF of the current cycle, the current moon cycle, in the newsletter, the moon letters. So you can print that out for free, or there's the digital calendar, because we sold out so long ago. So we're going to be printing more in the fall for being able to use that tool. And then Sita and I are doing a second round of a whole lunar cycle resets. So if you're interested in that, that's on the website as well. And Instagram, but like I said, I'm not posting as much, but it just kind of, that's more of an ebb and flow at this point, as things kind of are in reformation.
Right
Instagram,
on.
Facebook too, yeah.
Right on. So check it out, y'all. The moon is my calendar.com. I actually have the free gift y'all sent out this round with all of the phases of the moons and the dates on my refrigerator. I keep it right there. It just, helps me to remember when to go out and for low tide and high tide and, all those cycles around us, helps me stay engaged. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And Sita,
And
her website as well.
it's on which one?
Sita also has her website as well.
Oh, Sita, share your website as well.
Yeah, it's oneearthhealingarts.com. And I have in the works, it's not published yet, but if there are people who are interested in doing a yoga for beginners immersion, I think I'm going to do 2 days a week in the morning, even just for a half an hour, to help people really establish an anchoring routine for well-being, for thriving. And that'll just be very simple, basic yoga practices for all bodies.
And I have to vouch for Sita's yoga because when I met you, I had been really turned off by a lot of the yoga classes that go on nowadays. I don't want to, put any names out there, but there's certain major brands of yoga that are very they're they move too fast for the body and the energy and the breath to actually catch up and engage in the way that yoga is intended to engage you from your center. And the yoga sessions I joined with Sita, always, I'm telling you, at the end I was exhaling. And that's what you want. You, after a good session with good friends, after a good cry, after a good yoga session, whatever, you want to feel your body just exhaling, and you know that you've released some major stuff. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and close. We went way over time. Thank you for staying the extra time, Sita and April and Rasha. I know you all have so many amazing, important things to do, time to spend with your families. So thanks for sharing that time with us. Thank your families for me as well. And we hope to have you all back at some point to share some of the additional work that you're doing and to hear how you're doing.
Thank you, April and Sita, and you guys have a good night. And I'll talk to you soon, Ayori.
All right. Have a happy weekend.
All
All
right,
right, y'all.
bye.
Thanks for joining, everyone, all listeners and audience. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.